Off we go into the wild blue yonder, climbing high into the sun. Here they come, zooming to meet our thunder. Atom boys, give her the gun. Now
Hello, this is John Aker, call sign Nomad. This is my YouTube channel. The top line of the splash screen is their YouTube is calling a handle, part of the URL to find this channel, youtube.com/@ John Aker, aviating author. And note the dots, the periods between the last four words. That forms the handle. This introduction is the first of more than a dozen videos that I generated that follow my autobiography, recollections, my life in and out of the military. And they will represent planes I flew during the 18 years of active flying status I was on during my 20-year military career as a United States Air Force pilot. I found software that runs in the computer flight simulator world, matching airplanes that I flew in real life. And I narrate them with a narrative stream of consciousness, stories of what was happening in my life during the times when I flew those airplanes. And, well, they're war stories, you know, of course. And in war stories, you have to be careful because the first liar ain't got a chance. I learn a little bit about computer flight simulators and videos, the equipment I use to get it done, and we'll have some fun. And check your six back there. I might be on your tail. Nomad is back. Let's take a look at the rest of this series. Well, here we are. We've arrived at, as you can see by the chart, next to the last one in our series. This is the 10th video. Actually, it's the 16th video in the series. One of them doubled up, and we had those extras for the 135 airframe. And I'm on my southern assignment. Frozen Chosen, the Republic of Korea, South Korea. We're flying with base flight once again. A choice between T-Birds and another airplane. They didn't like many people flying the T-Bird so close to the DMZ, so I got to fly the Gooney Bird, the venerable C47 Douglas Skytrain. Let's take a look and see how she flew. Welcome back. This is John Aker, the Nomad, coming to you with the overview look at the airfield at Osan Air Base, Korea. We'll look at that location on a map a little later when we get there. The last video, as you probably remember, I left Alaska after flying my wife and children out a week early and having that 727 airline pilot scare the bejeebers out of me with his climb out. I did get an assignment back to a school in the States. That gave me a chance to take a little leave, get my family situated, and down to Daytona Beach, Florida, on the east coast of Florida, where Pat's parents were living. And we got set up in a house in Daytona Beach Shores, which is just on the south side of Daytona Beach. And I took off to McCord. This is where the earlier ones I kept saying I was going to McCord, but this is when I finally got there. McCord was the launch point for overseas. I got to hop out on a DC-8 stretch full of dependents and children. Refueling stop in Alaska, and then on into Japan, and then to Kimpo, the air base serving Seoul, the capital of South Korea. And I was filling a tactical reconnaissance officer slot. So that's the school they sent me to in the States. I left Pat, drove up to Myrtle Beach Air Force Base, South Carolina, a couple of weeks down there, and then I took those hops over to McCord. The office seeing the overall operations here was the 13th Air Division. Had a Brigadier General in charge. It was the only Air Force accompanied slot on the base. Everybody else was unaccompanied. And the Lieutenant's Fighter Squadron was a tactical fighter squadron flying F-4 Phantoms. Base flight had the typical assortment, T-33s and C47s, the old Gooney Bird. And apparently they were short on Gooney Bird pilots, so with the luck of the draw, that was my assignment. I got, in a year there, I got 100 hours as in the right seat in the C47. Okay, let's take a look at that airplane. And here she is sitting on the ramp. Take a quick look around at the interior. This is pretty much what we had. This is a Sperry autopilot. Dates back to the, I think, into the 1930s. I know 1940s. These airplanes were older than me. I was in my mid-30s when I hit here. I'm going to get the sim people gave us a few whistles and bells. We could click this little logo up here and get rid of the yoke so we could see the rest of the panel and set our radios. I've got a frequency set into that radio. And I think these still operate. She had windshield wipers. I don't recall using those. And notice the old whiskey compass, the standby compass, suspended by 3 bungee cords to keep it away from as much metal as possible, because any metal in the airplane affected that little old whiskey compass. Center console. And some of the piping and tubing in here look like they're right out of a Rube Goldberg cartoon. You got to remember, this airplane goes back into the early 30s. And look at the outside. The exterior. And you notice this one's not painted. Once we flew, we're in olive drab. But I picked this one. It's DC-3 Airways. DC-3 Airways was a virtual airline started back in the early 2000s by Charles Wood. And I remember running across them, and they were up to about 275, 80 pilots signed on, and there was talk of cutting off the new members at 300, so I raced in and signed up with them, but by the time I got there, I got 324. And the pilot numbers, they're not all current obviously at this time, but pilot numbers are over 3,000 with an airline whose motto was something like when flying was fun. She was a pretty good old bird. I got 2,000 hours virtual time, flying time with this virtual airway. A lot of fun. Multiplayer. We'd get together and a gaggle would form up, fly from one airbase to another. Let's see if we can get the engine started on the old girl here. There we go. Again, not a normal start. They both start at the same time. Okay, I'm going to take a little trip around here and I'll tell you some stories. How about my time here in Frozen Chosin? Chosin was the old name for Korea back before it came two countries. Of course, I always joked that this was my southern tour since it was South Korea. And I was Phil Knights, as I said, a tactical reconnaissance officer slot. I knew absolutely nothing about tactical reconnaissance. Yeah, let's keep the old tail down. Put a notch of flaps in there. Okay, fly the tail off the ground. Whoa, come on, old girl. Get airborne. Bring that gear up into the engine nacelles. Of course, it didn't quite make it all the way in there. Clean the flaps up here. And I thought we'd take a quick trip up to Seoul. See what Seoul looks like in this flight simulator. It's a little different than what we've been used to. Most of my flights were in Microsoft Flight Sim 10. This is X-Plane 11, XP11. I checked out this sim back in the day when they were on XP1 or 2. They looked promising, and to be honest, they beat the bejesus out of Microsoft. They've got, this is a home version. They've got a commercial version, which is, I think, a couple $1,000. But you can, it's FAA certified. And we just did a loop and turn back over the airfield. And we're headed north-northwest towards Seoul. I'm going to pause her here for a minute and give us an geographic orientation of where we are. Here's a typical flight plan that we might have flown back then. Osan is right here. Seoul is here, about 20 miles or so up here, and just 40 miles from Seoul is the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, 17th parallel. Probably rings a bell from some of you folks who know the history of the area. The Gooney Bird out of Osan was, we handled small items of cargo some priority deliveries, and a typical basis we might have hit on a round robin. We're from Osan down here to Kunsan. Out of Kunsan, short leg down here to Gwangju. And these names are spelled differently, and you'll find them on the map. Most of them, a lot of them are K's, spelled begin with a K, and translated in anglicized Korean, and they're G's, the letter G. Gwangju over here to Daegu, and these bases all had, back in the day in the 50s, they had K names. Osan was K55, Kunsan was K8, Gwangju, I couldn't find a K number. It may not have been active in the 50s. Daegu was K2, and the last base on our round robin was here at Gangneung, which was K18, back into Osan. So that's what the base looked like. The terrain was not too high. There were some mountains. You did have to make sure you had clearance there. We flew mostly VFR, and we hand flew because I don't remember the Sperry autopilot being even installed in the models of the C47 we were flying. There was an island, as I recall, it was out here and fairly close to the DMZ that belonged to South Korea. And I remember the name as being Jeju-do Island. I couldn't find it on these maps. And we did fly C-47 flights in there. There was no runway. They landed on the sand beach. Used it for a runway. And they asked if I'd like to fly up in there, and we discussed it. And with my SAC recce clearances, those running above top secret, the idea of being picked up there by rogue North Koreans wasn't very enticing, so I passed on those flights. And let's stow that map back over here out of the way so we can see what's going on. I was actually assigned to a part of the 314th Air Division, and there was another very small unit. In fact, it was staffed by one officer, Major Jack Donovan, and the name was 5th Air Force ADVON, Advanced Operational Node, very small node. I got to know Jack pretty well. Jack came out of Southeast Asia. He was an electronic warfare officer in EWO. He was a backseater in the Wild Weasel program. Those were the SAM killers, surface air missile killers. Jack was a part of the program before it was a program. He'd been a B-52 electronic warfare officer, and they were asking for volunteers for a new program, and Jack volunteered. And he was in on the ground level of building the whole Wild Weasel program. Jack was outspoken. He was brash and loud. The only problem with arguing with him was you got to figure you're going to lose, because Jack knew the facts and the history, and he was generally right. He was interviewed by some news people while they were building this program, and he described the program and the acronym for his description is still part of the original Wild Weasel shoulder patch. Rather than reading it to you, I've got the note in the notes. I thought I'd play a film clip for you, and you could get the words in Jack's inimitable fashion, direct from the horse's mouth.
Task Force immediately went to industry, seeking ideas for combating the Russian SAMs. They came up with a novel concept.
You want me to fly in the back of a little tiny fighter aircraft with a crazy fighter pilot who thinks he's invincible, home in on a SAM site in North Vietnam and shoot it before it shoots me? You gotta be shitting me.
I feel loneliness and fear and pain. I have seen brave and daring deeds insane. I have seen.
This was the birth of the Wild Weasel, a two-seat F-100 Super Sabre designed to hunt down the SAM sites electronically and lead the attack on them.
For those of you who might want to see more of this video, the full Wild Weasel video is on YouTube. The URL is in the center in green. If you want a shortcut, I created a bit.ly, which is shortcut for HTTP URLs. It's bit.ly/weasel-jack. That'll get you there. And I watched the whole thing through again, and I learned a lot about the Weasel program and what Jack's life must have been. I think you'll enjoy it. Give it a shot.
Now, what'd you think of Jack? I tell you, I consider Jack a friend. He cemented that friendship. He was up for his mid-tour leave earlier than me, so he went back. His family was in Orlando, which is the center of the state, about 50, 60 miles from Daytona Beach. And while he was there, you got 2 weeks, not counting, and your travel time came out of that. So he didn't have much time with his wife and kids. But he got in touch with Pat, and he and his wife devoted an evening of their mid-tour leave time driving over to Daytona and taking Pat out to dinner. You don't meet people like that very often. So when Jack rotated out into his tour in Korea, I took over that slot in the 5th Air Force Advon. I'm sorry to see Jack go. He's a hell of a man, a hell of an aviator, and a hell of a human being. Jack passed a few years back. And I miss him. First thing he did, I no more got into that one-man slot. 5th Air Force says, we're going to beef it up. So they staffed it up to 5 officers and 2 NCOs and one of the guys. Our job was to frag the F-4s. That's not tossing a hand grenade into your boss's hooch in the Vietnam. Comes from fragmentary order, which is a suborder of an operational plan that covers your whole range of duties. And we fragged the F-4s on missions up and around Korea. And we based each frag order on an operations order, and the number was in there. And one day my boss says, I'd like to see that operational order. And I said, it doesn't exist. I've done without creating a lot of problems. He said, well, we got to write that op plan. And I said, don't think it's a good idea. The basic idea came from Super Colonel, but my boss insisted. It's getting a little more hilly and rocky out here as we head north. South Korea is agricultural. North Korea is not too much of anything. I mentioned Super Colonel. He was a full colonel on the staff in 5th Air Force in Japan. That's, I think, was at Yokota Air Base. Yeah, while I'm talking here, let's take a little 360-degree turn here and look at some of the landscape. No, Super Colonel. The man deserved his star as a brigadier general, but apparently he was brash and outspoken, kind of like Jack Donovan. And the chances of him getting that star were next to nothing. So we survived right in the ops order, and we got word that there was a special mission coming in country, going to fly a reconnaissance mission along the DMZ, and it was a slow mover, it wasn't a jet. So we were tasked to provide tactical air cover for them as they zipped along the, probably in that airplane, chugged along the DMZ from the east coast to the west coast. And I got crossways with our division commander on this one. My boss had set up, we needed to deliver the tasking orders in hand because they were top secret special intelligence level communications. That's above top secret. Okay, there's our 360. We'll head on up to Seoul here. So I lined things up, got a C47 ready, and I was going to go along as the briefing officer. And we had to brief the Air Division commander. We're in his office, which was pretty ostentatious. And I said I've laid on this flight around Korea to touch base with these fighter squadrons who are going to be supporting us. And he stopped me there, and I used the wrong word, He says, I'm the only one on this base that's authorized to schedule and lay on missions. And the boss who told me to lay this mission on was sitting in the room, stone cold silent. So the only thing I said was, yes sir, that's correct. With your concurrence, I will schedule the flight. And he called me the worst staff officer he'd ever seen. I said to myself, I'll wear that as a badge of honor. Rumor had it that when he left Korea, he went to a plush European assignment and was sent home early from his tour. Of course, you never know whether rumors are true or not. So we got it scheduled. The other thing he said was he wanted co-equal altitude and airspeed for the F-4s to escort them. They're supposed to throttle back to the speed of this slow mover. And I got with the squadron commander and I said, why don't you fly a demo test run on that and see what it's like at airspeed chugging across the DMZ. So he did. Back in the old days, I mentioned this earlier, they were hanging on the props. Slow down to that altitude and do any kind of maneuver, and they were in minimum burner. F4 had 4 stages of, more than 1 stage burner, and they had to put it into minimum burners setting to stay in the air, which meant they were using a ton of gas. I don't remember how we got around it, but I think they laid on extra F4s, and they had a couple. Oh, I remember one of the fighter jocks asked me, he says, what are we doing up there? Instead of keeping our mock up and S-ing back and forth to my escort this guy, what are we doing up there? I says, well, you're giving them 4 more tailpipes to shoot at. That's the only damn thing I can think of. Okay, that airbase airfield down there, you see off my nose is Kimpo, the Kimpo International. Serves the city of Seoul, the capital of Republic of Korea or South Korea. And we're coming up on that river. I don't remember the name of it, and it's not the DMZ demarcation line, but I'm not going to go north of it. I think I'll just turn around and we'll head back south. I do recall a day. We were in our office at 5th Advon. Super Colonel was on one of his visits to Osan to check in with the division commander and see what was going on. He took over my boss's office, and he came out and I don't think he even told us why he wanted it, but he wanted 2 F-4s in the air, loaded with air-to-air munitions, on a combat air patrol over the base. And you just didn't argue with Super Colonel. So they sat down and started to write the frag order to get these guys in the air. And I swear to God, it took us an hour diddling around over the plural of F4. You call one an F4, what do you call 2 airplanes, 2 F4s? Is it F4S? Is it F4 apostrophe S? I even went across the street and the secretaries over there I knew that had secretary manuals, and we checked it out and I brought back an answer, I don't recall, and they couldn't buy it. I said, well, if nothing else, then call them 2 by F4. That's the way they typically referred to them previously in the op frag orders. The letter 2, lowercase x for by, and F4. Well, we were still arguing over it when Super Colonel came out of his office and he says, you got those birds in the air yet? No, sir, we're still writing the frag order. And I don't think I'm going to repeat his words. I don't know whether what he said, but I don't think it was probably complimentary. He picked up the phone, dialed the squadron commander of the F4 unit there, and he says, called him by his first name, he knew him. He says, I want air-to-air munitions, give me 2 in the air now. And within about 6 or 8 minutes, we could hear the afterburners light down on the runway when those 2 F4s smoked off into the gathering daylight. There was a monthly meeting, had to do with reconnaissance, high-level security at Yokosuka Naval Base in Japan. For those of you who haven't been over there, see the name, you probably call it Yokosuka, but that's just not right. It required a top secret special intelligence level clearance to attend. Let's see what we're doing inside the cockpit. Okay, let's fly around in here for a while. It's not quite noisy. Being one of the few on the base with that clearance level, I attended several of the meetings over there, came back, and none of the bosses had any interest in going to Yokosuka. It was out of the country, but in Japan, but wasn't fancy enough for them. I get one of the meetings we decided to schedule the next one at John Hay Air Base in the Philippines, which was known as a rather plush assignment with more accoutrements than Yokosuka. Put that into the report when I got back, and since we were going to a fancier base the next month, guess who didn't get to go? Me. My boss went instead. How's that figure? RHIP. Rank has its privileges. And it came time for my mid-tour leave. The chances of getting out of Osan were pretty slim. There wasn't that much traffic where you could catch space available seat on a bird heading where you wanted to go. So I thought, well, if I can get to Kadena on official orders, space A out of there is a lot easier. So I went to my boss and says, I'd like to send me down to Kadena. He says, no. He said, well, you know, because you don't have any reason, maybe if they'd asked you to come, it might work. So I went to the phone and got on a secure line down to some of the recce guys I knew in Kadena. I told them what it was. I said my boss is being a hard ass. I said, you know, just a quick note that there's some things we could coordinate between what we're doing here and what you're doing in Korea. So the next thing I know, there's a message comes in asking for me to come down to Kadena. Took it to my boss. He hemmed and hawed and finally allowed us how I could go. And I think he threw some other stumbling blocks in there, but each time he did, I found something. And this message from him sealed the deal. If he had just said, "You're trying to pull a fast one, Acre, cut out the bullshit," I'd have said, "Yes, sir," and marched smartly on my way. But it was his attitude. I said, "I ain't gonna let this guy beat me. He ain't worth it." So I got my orders to Kadena, hit down there, base ops lobby. Say was jam-packed with guys that had been there a week. I made a quick trip over and visited the office and sent the message to get me up there and fulfilled that requirement. Went back over to base ops, and I remember when I was going through upgrade training for the KC-135, my aircraft commander in the simulator was a guy nicknamed Big Dan, the tanker man. Who do I see wandering through base ops? Is Dan. So I got a hold of him. I said, "Dan," I told him I was looking for a ride to Hawaii. He was flying four-jet engine cargo planes, the Starlifter. He says, "I got a load for in-country Vietnam in the today." He says, "I'll be back through here tomorrow. If you're still here," he says, "you got a ride." I was still there. I got a ride. It's great to have friends. I got to Hawaii, Oahu, a cross-country flight from Daytona Beach to LAX, Los Angeles. She got there and checked in. They said, "Your flight's overbooked." I said, "But if you'd like to, if you can get on this airplane in the next 30 minutes, we can get you to Hawaii first class on a 747. Hell, how about that? That's a no-brainer. So I was there on the waiting at the end of the jetway when Pat came in off her first class flight. Did I mention they serve champagne on the first class, to the first class area on the 747? And she had her share. But she was still ambulatory. That's good. We enjoyed a hell of a 2-week time together in Hawaii. Okay, I'm going to swing a little to the west here. Went down to a couple thousand feet, keeping an eye on these hills. It's actually pretty, as you saw on that map, it's pretty close to the west coast. Actually, all the time thinking back on it, I always thought of Osan as being in the center of the peninsula, but it was actually almost buttoned up to the west coast. See if I can swing out here and we'll try an ILS back to the opposite runway. Okay, we're down to about 2,000 feet. So after mid-tour, it's back to the grind. Doing the same thing we've been doing. I actually considered most of the time I spent in Korea a waste of time, except for meeting some good people like Jack Donovan. Yeah, we're almost far enough west, I'll start swinging south. The tour in the ROK, the Rock, was 13 months. And that was based on the fact that in the early days, I guess before airplanes, the Army sent their troops over here by ship, and it took those boats a whole month to get here. No, I take that back. It took them 2 weeks transit time each way, so they tacked a full month onto a 12-month tour. So when you got down to 99 days to go, you started usually a graphic of something with 99 slots on it to color in instead of a calendar. And at 99 days, I went to the O Club. I made sure it was happy hour. And I rang the bell at the bar. I said, Henry, that was one of our Korean bartenders. I said, ring that bell for me. He grinned and rang the bell. He knew he was going to have to put on tennis shoes to keep up with the crowd. Finally, they were calling people in off the street to enjoy free drinks. I finally called a halt to it after, I don't know, an hour or more. And I got to tell you, my bar tab was about $12. I forgot to tell you, during happy hour, call whiskey was 15 cents. At the end of happy hour, it went up to a quarter. So even at 25 cents, it wouldn't have hurt me too bad. But I probably made a few friends that day. And it looks like the ILS is active here. Got a localizer and a glide slope. And one more ration of crap my boss threw into the pot. Okay, let's swing back around, make a 180 here. See if we can roll out on the localizer for runway 09. Generally, on your 13-month tour, they let you go in the 12th month. I arrived in early December, and I had a Merry Christmas card up on the top of my dresser that said, Bah Humbug. And my boss is talking about keeping me over into January, which would give me 2 Christmases and Frozen Chosen. I don't remember what I told him. I think I probably told him what I thought of the idea. And he did relent. And I did come home and I made it to Daytona Beach Shores in about mid-December. That would have been, go back, that would be 1971. First thing my wife and children did was take me shopping. I had straight leg slacks, and bell bottoms were all the rage when I got back to the real world. So I remember coming home with a pair of brown and a pair of blue bell bottom slacks to wear. Leave it to the wife and daughters to dress their dad so he wouldn't be embarrassed when he went out in public. And we went somewhere around 70 to 80 knots. Airspeed coming down here. The difference in getting different airplanes. Years in the 135 on takeoff, and as soon as you planted the nose wheel on landing, you held the yoke full forward. Keep that nose wheel down. Well, remember, this one's got that third wheel landing gear on the other end of the airplane. It's back here on the tail. So for the initial part of takeoff, you're holding the yoke back, and come around 50 knots, you fly the tail off the ground. You're in level flight attitude, and she'll come off the ground. Well, I was, again, used to hold that yoke full forward all the way to rotate. So I'm in the co-pilot seat making a takeoff. Back in my lap. And we came off the ground probably at about 60 knots. It was okay if you don't over control. And my instructor pilot says, well, we're supposed to demonstrate a short field takeoff to you, but I think you just did one. So, I guess if you're good, sometimes you can whip it. Alright, there's that old flat slope. Got her centered in the case. And got a pretty good lineup on 09 left. Things take a while when you're chugging along. Gives you a little time to think. As I tell people, keep your eyes out. When you get lulled into a false sense of security, those people out there trying to kill you jump up and stab you in the butt. I don't know the scenery around outside the base very well. Didn't go off base all that much. There was a place outside the place called Chicoville, which I understood stood for Mud Village. And there wasn't much down there but bars and B-girls. There was plenty of cheap whiskey at the O Club. Didn't need the other part of it. Okay, get that tail on the ground. Let me put any brakes on it. Because you're zooming along on them front wheels, and you don't have that tail wheel glued to the ground, and you tap the brakes, instead of slowing down, the airplane just rotates around those wheels. Okay, let's see if we can make this taxiway here. Nobody's modeled this base. We're cleared across the active. Nobody's modeled this base, so you don't have any buildings around, but the exterior scenery is far more sophisticated than Flight Simulator 10. Bring those flaps up. Okay, we'll put her on this run-up tab. Got those engines, but maintenance taken from here. So we're wrapping up our time at Osan Air Base, Korea. I'm headed back to the States. I'll meet Pat and the children in Daytona Beach shores. And I'm headed for Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, the 55th Strategic Reconnaissance Wing, as a line pilot. When I got a phone call. On leave in the middle of headed to Offutt, and they said instead of going to the that line pilot slot, would you like to go to the Strategic Reconnaissance Center, SAC headquarters? And I said, I'll do that. Different job, same base. So I'll see you in Nebraska next time out. This is a Nomad telling you to keep your head on that swivel and eye on your 6. You don't want me slipping up on you. See you in the air next time. If you enjoyed some of this material, you might reach up there and click that like button. Want to come back, hit the subscribe to this channel. This is John Aker, call sign Nomad, flying flight simulators based on my career as a U.S. Air Force pilot.
They took the blue from the skies and a pretty girl's eyes and a touch of Old Glory's hue, and gave it to the men who proudly wear the U.S. Air Force blue. The U.S. Air Force blue. Oh, they are men with a dream on America's team. They're a rugged